So I want to talk about Joe Rogan, which I listened to the podcast quite a bit. I actually also saw him at the Comedy Store in Los Angeles, and just quick tangent, but he was the strangest looking person that I've ever seen. Like he looks kind of but he's like, he had the meatiest hands, and like he doesn't look like a normal person if you see him. But that's an aside. So, but I listened to the podcast quite a bit before, and sometimes, to be honest, like I want to bang my head against the wall because he has some pretty meatheady takes and like is not very politically aware in some things. But in that way, he's like kind of like the average American. Who I talk to a lot of the average Americans. I'd like to think they're below average. Was that George Carlin joke? It's like, think of the average American. I think how stupid the average American is. Now, realize that half of them are just dumber than that. A little bit of truth in that. I'm not anti-populist, but it's like the average American does not know very much about politics. And I'd say that Joe is smarter than the average American, but still not smart enough to know basic things that he talks about sometimes, and also has like a lot of meatheady views on stuff. So it's like, it's not great, but it is refreshing in that he is kind of authentic and just a regular guy, which I would rather listen to, and tens of millions of other people would rather listen to, than the smart, sophisticated suits on TV repackaging establishment ideas over and over again, not realizing that they're serving the interests of the corporations and the multinationals that are employing them and running commercials on their networks, and instead thinking that they're original and, super articulate and liberal. But it's like, I don't like those people, and they don't like that that people like me or other people would listen to people like him who don't have college degrees and don't wear fancy suits and kind of just like fart and fish all the time. And, he's a cage fighting commentator, and it's like, they don't like that. And he has a viewership way, way bigger than them. And so that's a dynamic that people need to keep in consideration as they side with those establishment folks who leftists don't usually like, but they have the same exact position on this and also a number of other issues. I think that you need to be aware of why that is. So it's like the reason that I think the establishment people are canceling him is because he has a way bigger show than them. And it's like the leftists say that they'll cancel him because of like these things that he said or these people that he's platformed. And it's like nominally, okay, I guess he said the N-word a number of years back. That's definitely not good. But Trudeau's in blackface, and he's, everybody loves him on those networks. So it's extremely selective. Like if you go back, like even with I think he's probably done maybe like 1,500 podcasts. They're like 3 hours long each. So that's like 4,500. Let's say it's like 5,000 hours of material of him talking. So what is that? 24. Let's say it was 4,800 hours. So that would be divided by 24 is that 200? 200 days of talking straight, no sleeping. Talk for 200 days, let alone 200 hours. Talk for 200 days straight and see if you don't put your foot in your mouth in a way that they can't run on MSNBC and make you look pretty stupid, especially when you're like drunk and high for a number of those days as you talk on the internet. So it's like, that's kind of what the dynamic is, and any average American doing that would say some stupid things, and probably worse than Joe said. But it does allow those other, frankly, like competitors with him who don't like him because because culturally he's different. He doesn't go to wine and cheese parties. He goes to cage fighting events and stand-up comedy things, and has tattoos on his arm and hunts. He's just like, they don't like those people. They like NPR watching, Volvo driving, wine sipping, suit wearing type folks. So that is a dynamic too. But also it's the competitor. So he's like, they're losing out to this redneck essentially. It's like, I don't like that. Let's cancel him. So they go through 200 days of material and they canceled him. And it's like, so that's kind of dynamic. But why the leftists, and I'm talking about like actual leftists, are like all on the same side of the establishment, not just on this issue, but other ones too, I've noticed. I think people need to be re-examined, because it's like, he has some bad positions. I've heard him have bad positions on like paternity care. He has kind of like some pull yourself up by the bootstraps type mentality things that are kind of like a little bit associated with being a meathead, I'm sure. He'll like platform conservatives that I don't like. Although, honestly, like, most of the people that they're referencing him as platforming as being conservative are, like, have nuanced positions. Like, he'll platform Ben Shapiro, who's conservative, who platformed Crowder, who's conservative. But it's like the other ones are like, Sam Harris is not conservative. He's like, I don't like him that much. But even Jordan Peterson, like, is not strictly conservative in the way that it's like there's nuance on all the, and then you go down the line and there's like the IDW type folks. It's like, okay, you might not like them, but they're like not conservative in the way that you're trying to paint them and caricature them as being conservative, because it's easier to say, look at all these alt-right folks. And I know he's had like Milo on his podcast and things like that before, but I don't think I think it's been years and years since that's happened. And it's like, also there's kind of like a left-wing idea that is like, you know, people should be allowed to speak, and it's like you should also want to talk to other people. And so I know there's when you have an audience of millions of people, there's, you got to kind of maybe push back sometimes. But at the end of the day, like, I don't know where I'm going with that, but I just don't think that having conservatives on your show is justification for cancellation in any circumstance. And then furthermore, like, he is not right-wing himself, and it's like I've heard him say on his show before that he's never voted for a Republican. I've heard him say, he said he endorsed Bernie Sanders. It's like all these establishment-type people, none of them, they all hate Bernie, they all hate Joe. Like, what does that say? And what does it say that you, the people that say that you love Bernie, are canceling the people that you're supposed to not like, when he is like the biggest voice elevating a lot of the positions, although not all of them and not perfectly and not articulately, that you're supposed to like. Like, I know he's in favor of, I've heard him say good stuff in favor of universal health care and single payer and Medicare for all, and he wants to legalize drugs, and he wants to end the wars, and he'll have a bunch of left-wingers on too. I've listened to Abby Martin there. You'll have Kyle Kalinske on. You'll have Cornel West on. Most of the people he has on are like comedians and cage fighters, which is like kind of why he has the appeal. But it's like, okay, you have this person who is sympathetic to a lot of your positions, is endorsing like your politician who's the entire establishment is dogpiling against, and then when the establishment cynically dogpiles against him, you're gonna join the dogpile. And then in that way, like this, it's like, okay, there's this independent kind of essentially like grassroots, like upwelling without any institutional structure, that is the Joe Rogan show and other shows like it, which has an audience of tens of millions of people that could be reached out to. And what you, the leftists, decide to do is say, F that guy, you're like a Nazi and we're going to cancel you. It is, they don't say it quite like that, but it's like, this guy's terrible. And I know you said some stuff about vaccines, which aren't good. Although even at that, like, I listened to a podcast years ago that was on his show, which was with Peter Hotez, who's like a doctor that's all over CNN and stuff now. And it was like, that's where I learned about vaccines more than any other thing, because like I had never really done a deep dive in vaccines, and Peter Hotez just went through not the COVID vaccine at that point, but just why vaccines are good. And it was actually like a good, interesting show. It was like 2 hours long. It was and it's like I've watched the Sanjay Gupta interview, which was, I don't know, maybe 6 months ago, or I don't know how long ago it was, but it's like he's not anti. So it's like okay, he has some conservative positions. He has some positions that aren't super great with regards to COVID or the vaccine, although you might want to go into the details of that too. But that doesn't mean that he's a conservative, much less a Nazi, or that he's anti-vax. And so it's like what you're doing is you're inaccurately painting him as that so you can dismiss and cancel him. And in so doing so, you kind of alienate and like make the tens of millions of people that like him, who are kind of normal, non-political people, think that you're a bunch of like ridiculous left-wing cancelers, which you kind of are being, and then what the right wing does is like they adopt and defend him. And I'll see like on Fox News when they have which is playing at my gym all the time, they're like defending Joe Rogan. When I listen to Joe Rogan, he's like talking trash on Fox News all the time. It doesn't have any of their positions on most of the important issues, but the Fox News viewers are thinking that like, or the Joe Rogan viewers are thinking that Fox News is like more closely aligned than like the leftists, not just the NBCs, but the leftists who have joined forces with the CNNs and the NBCs and the Hillary Clintons and the Bill Cristols in canceling him, for not realizing that they're being cynically manipulated into doing so in order to squash the competition for those institutions, and also are undermining any possibility for actually like reaching out. Because if the name of the game is building political coalitions in a way that actually is able to manifest change, what you need to do is reach out to existing areas where there are large swaths of overlap, as in like the Joe Rogan show, where he's, you know, endorsing Bernie Sanders and has most of those positions himself. If you actually said, like, you know, and pushed him a little bit farther and was like, okay, you know, this is, if you were being reasonable and, like, you know, not trying to cancel him, these people would maybe be more predisposed to agreeing with you. I don't know. That was a long rant. It kind of fizzled out at the end, but I just think that it's kind of like real. I mean, it's good for, I understand why they do it. I think a lot of the reason is because the left-wing audience are, it's like very identitarian. They don't like some of the things that they don't like is the jokes that he's made and stuff. And it's not so much about the policies, which I think is a problem in itself. But then also, it's like the audience doesn't like him, and if the YouTube algorithm support, like, will push things that your audience likes, and it's like if you talk about him, that video will go, you know, you'll get more clicks. So it's like then you end up reinforce, and you take the anti-Joe Rogan position, and so the tens of thousands of people that are listening to you are all like, yeah, F Joe Rogan, they, you know, because it's an echo chamber, but the tens of millions of people that are seeing that this is what's happening, but listen to him, are like, F you and F your team and F your ideas by association, and that's a problem if you're going to build coalitions. It's not a problem if you're going to build your own whatever YouTube channel or your own left-wing isolated talking to people who already agree with you platform. But it's like, if you like actually want to institute change, you're going to need to talk to regular people. And I've got news for you. Regular people don't even know what single payer is. They literally probably wouldn't even know it's related to healthcare. They would probably think it's one person paying for groceries or something like that if you ask them what single payer was. And same with most political issues. They don't really know it. So you got to reach out to them. And if you can't reach out to the average American, which the average American, it's roughly 50-50 Democrats, Republicans each election. Most people don't like either of them. The average American probably doesn't like politics. You need to reach out to these people. You even need to reach out to conservatives, which it's like I could go on forever, but you've got to reach out to people. You cannot dismiss them wholeheartedly. It's like you can dismiss the Nazis, but there's like, I don't know, there was like a couple hundred of them. There's probably like thousands of Nazis. There's hundreds of millions of people in the country. You can't dismiss tens of millions of them if you want to actually do anything, especially when it's like, in so doing so, you're like actually not even being honest or transparent or nuanced or, yeah, it's a bummer. Stop doing that.